Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, the 22nd of January 2009. My name is Mark Depew. I'm a volunteer with the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, and today we're doing the third session with Sandy Wheeler. If you recall, the first session dealt with Sandy's early life and quite a bit about her theatrical career and the myriad of other jobs that she had while living in Springfield. Part two of that interview was about her first couple years setting up the Rail Golf Classic as the executive director. I want to make sure I got that right.
That's it.
And we had a fascinating discussion about that. This session we want to focus on, okay, you had 27 years, so we only have 25 more years to cover in here, Sandy.
We can handle it.
Yeah, we can handle it. But I did want to cover all of that, and we plan to have one more session just to let the audience know after this where we actually go out to the rail golf course itself.
And sing two choruses of memories.
Well, you can. I'm not. Okay, let's start with a kind of a background questions here, because when we left off, we were talking about a document that you'd written after the second year, I believe, and kind of put some perspective on the myriad of responsibilities that anybody putting together something as ambitious as a golf tournament has to deal with. But draw back from that and tell us, Sandy, what your long-range goals were at that time.
Well, survival was number one on the list, because those first 2 years were just a test to see if the tournament could survive in Springfield, in a community of 100,000 where state government and tourism were the major industries. So, you know, getting sponsors to believe that this tournament could be successful, could give money to charity. So survival and money for charity were the initial goals that I had, knowing full well that down the road, with the way purses go on the tour, that you were always going to need more money to pay the players, which meant an increase in the purse. So that was always a challenge in where that money was going to come from.
Were you optimistic?
I was terribly optimistic and terribly hard-headed that it was going to happen. It's just the way it was.
You mean option just wasn't a failure? Or
failure was not an option. That's exactly.
I really butchered that.
Well, that's okay. But you know, that first-time gift of $50,000 got us off the bubble, allowed us to see the first tournament in black numbers vis-a-vis red, losing money, and first giving money to charity. And that was big, big, big for me, because the name of the organization, the not-for-profit organization, is Rail Charity Golf Classic. That's the not-for-profit group that was dedicated to raising money for charity. So, you know, I was saying we either need to fulfill this goal or we need to change our name.
Tell us a little bit about your management style.
Well, I didn't have to manage much those early years, because it was just me in the office. There was so much to learn, from operations to and developing brochures and printed pieces. I had never done any of these things. I was flying by the seat of my pants, and you know, I could refer back to what they had, but you know that you need to figure a way to make it better. Figuring out a marketing scheme, oh my gosh, or doing a budget. I didn't know anything about budgeting a golf tournament. Thank God we had board members that were willing to help me along in that issue, but I got to tell you that I probably didn't let go of that advice for 3 or 4 years, because it made me very, very nervous. And then you can start referring to what happened the year before, look at increases in costs, and hopefully you know what you're doing. But like any budget, the income has to match the expenses, and in our case, had the best expenses and still have money for charity. That was a very frightening part for me.
Were you primarily the person doing the books then?
Oh, yes. Yes, I was doing the marketing and doing the books, but we also had a volunteer. My dear friend Cornelia Hodges stepped in and donated her services to help me along, and she actually kept the official books from the records that I provided for her.
And then I would assume you had an auditor come in and check the books.
You know, we didn't have an auditor for years. We didn't. That came when we got bigger, when we were really out there.
And somebody decided you needed to do that just to protect yourself?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Here's the chance for you now to reflect on your own abilities. I want you to tell us what you think the strengths and the skills that you had that went into this job that made it successful.
Well, determination, belief in the project. I thought that the golf tournament was the best thing that Springfield had seen in a long, long, long time. I loved the idea that it was dedicated to charity, and at that point when I stepped in was not doing anything for charity. I was very focused and very determined. On the other side of the coin, I had some great secretarial skills, so I could keep, and my ability to communicate, I think, helped me a lot. My time in radio and television and meeting with people and performing, you know, I would talk to an audience of 1,000 like I'm talking to you today. That's just the way I am. And I think that helped me a lot in going in and meeting strangers and asking them to please, please, please help the golf tournament. I mean, that was, and believe me, Mark, those first few years, it was 8 days a week, 28 hours a day. I ate it, I slept it, I breathed it, and I think that determination was one of my greatest assets.
Well, how about shortcomings or things you would have liked to be able to do better?
I think possibly my straightforwardness that was misinterpreted as toughness was something that did not serve me well, especially as the years went on. What I put forward is not always what's in my heart.
Toughness, stubborn?
Not stubborn. Only when I thought I was right about something. I would fight for what I thought was right for the golf tournament.
Is that how some perceived you, though?
Yeah.
How about hard-headed?
Oh, yes. You know, you're getting them both there, stubborn and hard-headed.
Yeah, well, they kind of go together.
Well, you know what? You had to be to do what I was doing. It was certainly not for weak of spirit. All there had been before was failure. And so I had this challenge to take this event that I knew nothing about and try to make it something, try to make it viable. Again, trying to give money to charity, but being an asset to the community.
We've touched on this a little bit, especially in the last interview, but let me ask it in a different way. Do you think a lot of the people who were evaluating you, and in part the board because they had to, I mean, that was their responsibility, were they evaluating your performance as the manager, as the executive director, as a woman or as a manager? Or
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I know one of the issues that we had early on was once we had a couple of successful events under our belts, the board decided, or maybe the executive committee, the precious few, decided that I would do all the grunt work, raise all the money, run the office, do everything, excuse me, but that they would take the operations of the tournament upon themselves and I would not be involved. And that's when I planted my foot, because it was something to look forward to after the day-to-day hard work of looking for the almighty dollar, actually moving to the rail and seeing it evolve and being involved with all the volunteers. And that was the part that drove me all year long.
was there a point in time when you realized, I have arrived, the tournament has arrived, we've gotten there?
Oh, no. No. I knew, that to have the long-term survival, we had to have a title sponsor. And without that, there would be a wall that we would run into and that would be no more money. No more money to see the purses go. As a matter of fact, went to Japan twice in the 80s seeking the almighty title sponsor as a guest of the Japanese.
They invited you.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, what we want to do here for the next bit is to talk about the history of the golf tournament. And as we go through that, part of what we're going to be talking about, of course, is that quest for a title sponsor.
Tough stuff.
Tough stuff. So let's go back to 1980.
First tournament.
Nancy Lopez, her share that year was
$15,000. The purse was $100,000, which was the largest purse on the LPGA Tour when it was founded in 1976. But it stayed at $100,000 till.
And her cut of that was $15,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at that time, that's quite a stretch.
Well, you know, we didn't so much then think of it as only $15,000. I mean, for the LPGA, who was a growing organization, you know, only 50 years old, it was a nice purse, a nice $15,000 check. And I don't know whether I told you this story or not, but as little as I knew about golf and the tour, and you know, that first tournament was a very difficult time because it rained, yada yada yada. And I remember Phil Spengler, who was the guiding force in putting me in the executive director's chair. When Nancy won, he was in tears, and I thought, what's that all about? Well, I hadn't been paying attention, but she was just tearing it up on the tour and winning everything. So the fact that she came to Springfield, Illinois, and won our event was really big.
The face of women's golf at
yes,
the time.
Absolutely. And what a charmer she's been all these years.
And a real supporter.
Of this tournament? Absolutely.
I think we have a picture of Nancy that we can go to now somewhere in this process. And while we're
there
doing
she
that,
is. There she is.
You told me before I should be asking you about ecology.
Well, that first tournament in 1980 that Nancy won was a switch between the former operations organization that the tournament hires to a new operations organization called Executive Sports. And their philosophy in assisting a golf tournament was entirely different than Ken Young and Associates. So we followed their guidance and did everything we were supposed to do, but somebody forgot to tell us that Mr. Young and his crew also took care of the garbage, which is called ecology. So after the first day of the tournament, somebody says to me, and I think it was somebody with Executive Sports, they said, who's doing ecology? And I kind of got a blank look on my face, and I said, well, I don't know, you know.
And you're thinking, I wonder what they're talking about.
I was so lost, but come to find out that we needed somebody or somebodies to go out and collect all the trash from the trash boxes that have liners in them, and you pull the liners and take it back to the dumpster, of which back in those years there was only one. And so my husband Bill and my eldest son Lee got up at 4 o'clock every morning. We were at the golf course by 5, and they went around and did the whole ecology run, the whole way of the tournament.
Did he get a little extra on his allowance that time?
No, no, but that was one of many jobs that my husband and my son have done over the years.
Well, maybe this is a good time to interject how much a family affair this was for all of you.
Well, it had to be, because I was so totally encompassed in the whole picture, and especially tournament week. It got to the point where Bill and I decided that we needed to stay in the hotel where the players stay, because I couldn't go home at night and somebody wanted to know where their clothes were for school tomorrow. You know, did you do this, Mom? What's for dinner? You can't operate at that level. So we always moved into the hotel and stayed there tournament week, which helped me a lot. But Lee, let's see, Lee ran the practice range. Lee did ecology. I'm not remembering. Oh, he was did radio reporting, and of course he's played in the Pro-Am many, many times. Bill did ecology. was a walking score. As a matter of fact, you just had Joanne Carner's picture up there, and there's a great story about Joanne Carner's second win. It poured and poured and poured, and we knew it was going to pour before they teed off. And Bill had drawn, they were able to draw their players, who they were going to get to go with. And you always want your top 6 players back in those days to have a walking reporter, so that score could go right to the scoring trailer, and you knew exactly who was leading the tournament within those that had a possibility of winning. Well, before he went, he said, if it starts to rain, please bring me an umbrella. It started to rain. It started to pour. I was taking towels, running all over the golf course, taking towels to the caddies to try and keep the players playing. And I was soaked to the skin, and I stopped for a second, and I thought, oh my, I forgot Bill. And he's out there with Joanne Carner. Of course, she was dry because she had her umbrella and her rain suit, and her caddy had all the dry towels. So I grabbed an umbrella, and I go tearing out, and they were coming down 11th fairway. And I pulled up under the ropes, and he looked at me, and his hair was all hanging down. He was drenched, and he said, never mind. That's a very true story. I was in the proverbial doghouse because I really, but that's what happens. My girls, well, my sister, my oldest sister, Sharon, helped me in the office as a volunteer. Cracker Jack secretary, secretarial skills. She helped me a couple of years in the office, which was great. My eldest daughter, our eldest daughter, was in New York pursuing her acting and dancing career. And she came home the first year that we had tried to build our first skybox on the back of the bleachers. And I said, Liz, I need a hostess up there. I need somebody up there to say, this is going to be some VIP entertaining. And it was cold as the devil, and Liz didn't have anything but shorts with her. And I've still got pictures of her up there freezing in that little skybox. It wasn't enclosed at all. It was just kind of like that.
But otherwise a good trooper.
Oh, quite the trooper. Bradley Michael has done everything and anything that Mama ever needed. He's our youngest son, and in the latter years always helped me with moving, helping me move my personal stuff. And it's who have I forgotten? Missy has never worked on the tournament, and out of state. I mean, they come home to enjoy it, but that haven't been involved as volunteers. But I think we've had my sister, my youngest sister, and my brother-in-law were chairman of the Standard Bearer Committee for years. That's a big, big job. You have to recruit kids to carry the standard. Now, the standard is that pole with a little billboard on top that shows what the threesome is, what their score is for the tournament, and where they are today. So to get that many kids to go out with every threesome is quite a challenge, and Sarah and Rick did a great, great job.
And then to get them actually to do exactly what you want them to do.
Well, you know, over the years, we've had some kids get out there and say, this is too much, and they just lay down in the fairway. So now we have, it's true, we have an age differential now. We look, and hopefully, and have had adults over the years. But
well, let's go back to those early years again. 1981, you've already mentioned her name. Joanne Carner wins for the first time. Yes. And you already talked a little bit about winning again the next year in 1982.
Yep.
Joanne Carner, and quite a personality, right?
One of the great personalities of the LPGA Tour. Oh, so much fun. And they always stayed next door to us in the hotel. So Don and Joanne, her husband Don and Joanne would come over to see us. Now that's a good picture of...
She had a nickname, didn't she?
Big Mama. Big Mama. And she'd talk to the gallery. She'd have fun. She'd kick her golf club up in the air or twirl it if things were going. I mean, she was just a joy to be around. And probably the worst thing that happened is there was an event, a situation here in Springfield that ended quite unhappily. And Joanne and Don, she came back and defended, and that was the last we saw of Joanne Carner.
I mean, you don't want to go into any details.
Well, it was
on that?
unfortunate because we'd had a really, really great day at the golf course. The sun, it was Saturday, and the sun was bright. It was like perfect golf weather, maybe 80, 85 degrees, you know, and just bright, and the sky was so blue, and we'd had a perfect day. And Joanne and Don were loaned a car from one of the agencies here in Springfield. That's before we had a lot of cars to move around. And the laws in Florida and Illinois at that time were different. You could have an open beer in a car in Florida, but not in Illinois. And they were coming up from the golf course, going past the Ethnic Festival, as we know, which is a really, really big event. And they always put extra patrols out there during that time.
That's always out at the fairgrounds.
Out at the fairgrounds, yes. And I guess Don was speeding, which doesn't surprise me, and probably wasn't thinking a thing about it. Probably didn't even see what the speed limit was there. That's all I can imagine.
I would guess they're feeling pretty good. She just won the tournament, right?
No, this is Saturday. She
Okay,
hadn't
this is
won the
Saturday,
tournament.
okay.
But we just had a little ceremony honoring her because she was such a great champion for us. And she was leading again. So they got stopped. And Don Carner, you had to know Don to appreciate him. And I got to tell you that Don and Joanne were like this. They were together all the time. He supported her amateur career. And they eventually got married, and wherever she went, he went. That was the way it was. They loved to fish. They owned a big boat down in Florida. You know, just that was it. And we got to know them quite well. And Don was a bit of a character, and everybody knew it. So I guess Don got a little huffy with the young woman that stopped them. And come to find out later that she was a rookie, sheriff's deputy. And Don probably got a little huffy, and she looked in the car, and Joanne was sitting there with a cup in her hand, and the young lady asked if that was beer. And Don said, yes, is that a problem? And she said, well, that's illegal. So Don told Joanne to pour it out. And unfortunately, as the law goes, as I soon found out, that's obstruction of justice, and thereby hangs the tale. It got pretty ugly before the weekend was over, and it was heartbreaking to us.
Did you get personally involved in this?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We had decided that we were all going to go back to the hotel where we had a hospitality suite. It was a great day. Let's go up, put our feet up, and have a cool drink.
Some refreshments.
Some refreshments, yes. Liquid refreshments. And I went into my office to tell folks that I was leaving, and the phone rang. And as we do in the tournament office, anybody picks it up. So I picked it up and said, Rail Charity Golf Classic. And I heard, she had a very, very deep voice. I heard, Sandy. I said, oh, hi, Joanne. I mean, you couldn't miss her name. I said, oh, hi, Joanne. We've got a problem. And I said, oh, for crying out loud, did the hotel lock you out of your room? What's the problem? We'll take care of it. We're in jail. Well, I thought I was going to drop dead, and my mind was worrying, and I made probably one of the more intelligent statements I've ever made in my life. I said, stay right where you are. We'll be right there, as if they could go somewhere. But I didn't find out which jail they were in. Were they in the county or the city? I was so flabbergasted. So there went our happy time in the hotel, and it kind of took the weekend, took the air out of our sails. And Joanne did stay and won the tournament, and came back and defended the next year. But that was that. It's much too long to tell you how the whole weekend evolved.
They eventually were released on bail, I would assume?
Oh, yes, yeah, immediately. And
it says something about her as a player that even after that, she goes out and wins the tournament?
Exactly. And we were very, very, very proud of her. And I have to tell you that at that point in time on Saturday night, we had terrific support from the media. We knew that this was something that was an unhappy light on the golf tournament, and certainly on Joanne and Don. and we thought it would be appropriate if we could keep it quiet. And, excuse me, my husband, who had been in media for 40 plus years, started making the calls to the press, suggesting and asking if we could just keep a lid on it. And everybody agreed to do that with the concession that it was all or not. Everybody was going to keep a lid on it, or everybody was going to tell it. And he was quite successful in getting that done. And it wasn't until later Saturday night, or Sunday night. I remember we were playing on Labor Day back then, so we were just in. And Sunday night, some announcer decided that he was going to stir the pot, and it got pretty bad before the night was over. I was on the phone with the sheriff, and I was on the phone, Don, and I was so tired because we were up at 3 o'clock in the morning Saturday night, and my husband's job, real job, throughout tournament was to make me go to bed. No matter what was going on in the hospitality suite, you have to get some sleep, because I was up at 5 on my way to the golf course. And that night, Sunday night, he said at 9 o'clock, "You're going to bed," which I did. And I was sound asleep, and he comes in and wakes me up, and he said, you know, "Don Carner's here. You got to talk to him." So Don came in, and then I went back to sleep, and Don came back because this announcer kept saying they were going to come out to the golf course and arrest him on Monday. The rest of that story is at midnight I had to get up and go tell Joanne that they were not coming. It was over. That it was over. And but that gentleman didn't do us any favors. He made it much more difficult than it needed to be. Joanne's concern was, do I get Don out of town on a rail? Or, you know, it got that ugly. It really did. And it was unfortunate because everybody loved Joanne and what she brought to the golf tournament. And we remained friends throughout. And lots of times when we'd meet up at parties over the years, you know, and we'd talk, and I'd tell her every time, because I'd probably had a couple of toddies, that I'd never gotten over it, her not coming back. And a couple of times I was in tears because she meant so much to the galleries.
Does that mean that your last day of the tournament was normally
Labor Day?
Labor Day itself.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so we, and in those years, and Mark, I can't really remember, but we were switching back and forth. We started out as a 72-hole golf tournament. And then we thought, okay, maybe we can do better and get more players if we go to 54 holes. It was always a field question mark. You know, how can we attract the best, the most, the best, whatever? I mean, for years it was just, can we get a full field? That was a big issue. Also, where we were positioned on the schedule was a big issue, because it was Portland, Oregon to Springfield, and that was never easy. And Portland was a very, very popular golf tournament on a great golf course, and we were a fledgling golf tournament on a fledgling golf course.
In the middle of nowhere.
In the
I'm
middle
sure
of the
some
prairie.
them
That's right, in the middle of the prairie. And
How
it's
did
St.
you-
Louis and Chicago, and which way do we get there?
Yeah. How did you end up choosing those dates? And now that happened before you got there, but how did they arrive at that weekend?
When Mr. Sapp and Mr. Bunn, in meeting with the LPGA, said, well, let's go with Labor Day weekend, and maybe we can attach ourselves to the Jerry Lewis Muscular Dystrophy telecast, which was the first name of the tournament.
I think we did talk
We
about
did
that.
talk about that,
Okay.
yeah.
1983, Laura Peterson,
Laurie Peterson.
she wins in a playoff. Was that the first playoff that you'd had?
Yes, and it was two rookies, and I can't remember. No, it wasn't Sue Ertl. I can see this little girl's face. She was dark-headed, not very tall. I can't remember, but the sky was dark. There was a storm looming, and I can remember that Larry Wells and Frank Bender were co-tournament chairmen that year, and we had it was a one-hole playoff, and I can tell you, when Laurie sank that putt, the thunder and the lightning took off and the pouring rain, and we ended up all a bunch of drowned rats in the tent having the awards ceremony. That was she was a rookie. That was her first win.
But having that end in a playoff, was that a positive thing in terms of publicity and generating some excitement?
Oh, sure.
And all?
Absolutely. When you've got a tie and you've got to go out and play a few more holes, that's a very, very good deal. The only time that ever happened that made me really, really unhappy was when Dottie Pepper tied with Helen Dobson, and Dottie Pepper was a very good friend of mine, a wonderful player, just somebody you want to win your golf tournament, a big name. Mm-hmm. And here comes a rookie from England that nobody knew by the name of Helen Dobson, very sweet young lady, beat Dottie in a 5-hole playoff. And that was the first year of State Farm's title sponsorship.
My guess, though, Sandy, is that you can't let on to anybody that you have a favorite on.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, I have always been a proponent, no matter what I say here, I have always been a proponent that it's a tour. And it's a position that I took when we would have 2 of the top 10 or 3 of the top 10, and I was upset, not for me, I was upset because the top names draw the biggest gallery, which meant more money for charity. I always, this is something I tried to impress upon the media when they wanted to hammer on us because we only had, 2 of this and 3 of that. It's a tour, folks. It's a tour.
Mm-hmm. Moving along, 1984, Cindy Hill, but that also was a year that, from what I've read, Mary Beth Zimmerman hits 8 straight birdies out in the course.
Well, that was quite a record, and one of our deans of sports reporting, Coley Cowan, was out on the golf course following Mary Beth because she's from Hillsboro.
A good Illinois girl.
A good Illinois girl, and Coley was out there trying to get the story, and it's birdie, 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 birdie. He radios back to the media area. He said, "Does anybody know what's going on out here?" Those were his words. So it was really, really something, and it was the beginning of her career. But yes, and that's a record she held for a 9-hole record she held for a very, very long time.
But the other amazing thing is she didn't end up winning the tourney that year.
No.
Cindy Hill did.
That's right, and that was Cindy Hill's only win. And she, again, came out of nowhere, didn't have a big name, and Cindy Hill is one of our champions that just kind of faded from the picture. I don't know, where she is, what she's doing. She was a very quiet, sweet girl, and the win was big, and I think it stunned her, but that was it. She came back and defended, and probably played a few years after that, but her career was not lengthy.
And it was that year, I know that you donated $34,500 to charity.
Wow. That was pretty exciting.
Yeah, and that's a big leap from what you'd started at.
Oh, yeah, $6,000. That was the first year, and to get to that 5 figures was pretty exciting, and that's when we decided to start making some noise about what we were doing for charity. So making the community realize that we weren't only presenting professional golf, that we were doing something good for those in need. And it was also around that time that and the dollars were growing for charity, that we started thinking that we needed to take a careful look at, there were more dollars, should just 2 organizations be getting it, or should we start expanding our horizons as far as charitable contributions were concerned?
What were the 2 organizations?
St. John's and Memorial.
And after that, then you started to expand the number of charities you
yes,
get to?
Yes.
Or that year itself?
No, I don't know that it was that year. Mark,
Okay.
I can't really remember. I know that I made a recommendation to the executive committee that we should put together an ad hoc committee that each year would review, because people were starting to ask us, and that we should take a look at it. And it was a very interesting process, and sometimes a very heart-rending process. I mean, we heard some really sad stories.
who came up with the idea of using Media Day to take the players out to some of the charities and visit some of the charities that were benefiting from this?
Me.
Was that
Guilty.
something that other
No.
tournaments were doing?
No, but I can tell you that after we started it, some tournaments are doing it. I felt that it was important that they see what they were creating in the community with their play, with their ability to attract galleries that created the sponsorships and the dollars that ultimately would go to charity.
Did you get some feedback from the players?
Oh, always got a note from the player that said, I had no idea. I remember the second, Nancy Lopez's second win in '92. We took her up to St. John's NICU, where the money was going to go that year, and we've got pictures of her holding a little tiny preemie, and they were all, they felt good about it. Used to take them over to United Cerebral Palsy, and they'd actually go in the playroom. UCP, we started their first Lecotech program way back when. And Lecotech, the Lecotech program is toys that help children, children with disabilities learn to play. They're developed just to learn coordination. And so we'd take the players over there, and they'd get on the floor and play with the kids. And, you know, some of them had cerebral palsy, some of them were Down syndrome. And that was always a big day, always a big day.
Did you take all of the players with you?
Every defending champion. A Media Day is when you bring your defending champion back into the city. Treat the media to a day of golf. We go on the charity tour in the morning, then we have a luncheon and a news conference, and then the media and the board of directors and some of the committee chairs go out and play golf. We as the years went on, we didn't ask the player to stay and play golf. They would want to be compensated for that, and we didn't feel that it was necessary. Just wasn't necessary. They were there, they did their thing, they did their media visits, they made the charity visits, and as years went on, we used to fly them commercially, but as years went on, our good friend Dick Levi at Levi Ray and Schaub always provided his private plane, and I would fly out and pick up the defending champion and bring her back in and get her settled in the hotel overnight, and the next day we'd meet at 9 in the morning and probably visit 4 charities and then go to the rail.
When was the Media Day in relation to the actual tournament?
Well, you wanted to have some news. We'd usually do it in July. The only thing I can say about that is it was always hotter than the hinges of, and hot in the tent. We only lost, in my years, we only lost one Media Day, and that was the first year that Nancy, in 1981. And it poured and poured and poured. So here I am, the rookie executive director, trying to figure out how we're going to rearrange everything. Well, we did, because the Hilton helped us tremendously, and we held everything down at the Hilton, except they didn't get to play golf. But that's the only Media Day that ever got rained out.
Was it a matter of a contract that the winner would have to sign, acknowledging that if they did win the tournament, they would have to come back for the Media Day?
They don't have to, but it's an honor. And I will say that there was, it was easier in the 80s and early 90s than it has been as the tour has grown and the demands on the players are more. But I think the only person, as I recall, the only person that hasn't been to the annual Media Day was Annika Sorenstam after she won in 2006.
That's a pretty darn good record.
That's a pretty darn good record, and hooray for the players that have made that commitment. It's great, because they are not reimbursed for anything. You provide their travel, you provide their accommodations, but they're not pocketing anything.
Mm-hmm. Is this true for most tournaments out there as well?
Yes.
Okay.
But when Annika was had won so many tournaments, it got to the point where she couldn't possibly do that many Media Days, and that kind of set the tone for some players following her lead, but thank God that hasn't happened here.
1985 is the next year, That's a big year. That's the 10th anniversary.
Oh,
So,
wow.
well, in my respect,
Yeah.
the tournament has arrived. You've made 10 years. But some other interesting things happened that year. Betsy King won.
Yep.
But that's also the year that you landed another big coup, isn't it? And I know we've got some pictures of that.
I think we do have some pictures of that. I think we're going to see Bob Hope, with the help of John Holmeyer, who knew somebody that knew somebody that knew his manager out at his golf tournament in California. We probably worked on that for about 6 months, getting a commitment from him, and he cut his fee down tremendously. Again, we sent a plane. No, not for him. He flew in a private jet, and I went out to the airport to meet him in the limousine that was donated, or it was a contribution. I was always working that even 10 years later. Will you donate the limo? And sure enough, that guy was pretty excited to go pick up Bob Hope. And it was a delightful time. I went to rehearsal with him at the convention center. My son Lee, who is quite the musician, was in charge of putting the orchestra together for Hope, and so that was quite a nervous time. You know, he was a very young man, and here he is with this responsibility, but he knew all the musicians, and it worked beautifully. So we were in there in the afternoon, and all of a sudden, Bob and I were sitting on the bleachers over to the side. They were rehearsing the music and going through some other stuff. The door opens to the floor of the convention center, and in starts strolling the World War II veterans. Something that I hadn't even thought about. But the door was not locked. It could have been. He could have insisted that the door be locked, but he didn't. So in they start strolling, and it was like old home week, and one of the most touching things I've ever seen. And they'd say, "Remember when you were at so-and-so?" "Oh, I remember that." And it was wonderful. And I was so glad to be there and see that. Mm-hmm. Having no idea later down the road that we'd be working with World War II things, but that, and I had no camera there. There was no media there, and I thought, what a story this would be. But they got wind of it, and they talked about it. But that was also the year of the volunteer. Well, it wasn't the year of the volunteer. We wanted to give a volunteer award that year, and there was a woman. If there was ever anybody that was as excited as me about the Rail Charity Golf Classic on a day in and day out basis, it was Nancy McCabe. So we had a plaque done for her and took her up on stage with Bob Hope and all the past champions that were with us in the audience that night. And there she is. There's my darling Nancy.
Yeah, that's a great picture.
Well, there's Lori Merton and Beth Daniel and Sandra Palmer, the first champion. And I don't know what I have on, but it's
you were talking in that picture,
oh,
Sandy.
Yeah, I was talking to Bob, and I was telling him about Nancy. She was a darling, and she was a good golfer. She was a good amateur golfer, and I loved her to pieces. And we just lost her a couple of years ago.
Wow.
She lived to be 80 years old.
And, of course, Bob Hope himself was such a champion, not just for the veterans, but for golf.
Oh, for golf. Well, that was the whole thing. And he had just written a new book, of which I have my own autographed copy. We actually, he sat out on her umbrella table at the golf course before he played in the Pro-Am, and people lined up with their books, and he signed autographs for everybody. And then it was time for him to play in the Pro-Am. And again, it was so very hot. And his manager was there that I had talked with so much. And, of course, they had their own golf cart. And their tee time was at hand. And I watched his manager drive the golf cart under the ropes. Somebody hold the ropes. And I thought he was going to drive right up on the tee. I almost had a stroke. You don't drive on the tee. You stay in the long grass, okay? I thought, oh, my God, what's he doing? But he stopped. Bob got out. And there was the governor, and Phil Spengler, and John Holmeyer, and Hope. And Hope hit the first drive, and that was great. He hit a good one. Not long, but I'll tell you straight, he was 80 years old, for heaven's sakes. And Thompson was next. Governor Thompson was not a golfer at all, but he came out in some really good-looking, I'm laughing, golf pants.
I think we saw a picture of those.
Saw. Yeah. And he hit a very errant drive. And Hope looked at him and he said, "Don't worry, Governor, it's still in your state." and then the other people hit, and off they went. And I walked a few holes with them, and it was great fun. And then he had done his show the night before at the convention center, and probably the saddest thing for me was that we couldn't fill that convention center. And the commissioner then was John Lofheimer, and we had a stormy night was coming, and he asked me if I would mind if he left and got a plane out of Springfield to go to his next stop, whatever that was. And I kind of pouted a little bit, and he says, "Okay, Sandy, I'll stay." So he stayed, and before he left, he gave me a hug, and he said, "I have seen Bob Hope more times than I can remember, and tonight was the funniest I have ever seen him." So those that took the time to come and spend a few bucks to see one of the greatest entertainers of all time were well rewarded.
Well, of course, one of his trademarks was being able to personalize his humor for that event, that particular crowd.
Yep.
And I'm sure that was one of the reasons he found him so funny.
He was great. He was great.
I did want to ask you, when he was meeting all these veterans, did you get a sense that, okay, here we go again?
Oh, not at all. I got a sense of pure joy. He was happy to see them. Not at all. Nor did he say, "Let's cut this off. I got to go do that." Nope. He sat there. He talked to everyone that came in. And if he needed to rehearse, didn't matter. They were the important ones. It was fascinating, Mark.
So that would suggest that, as far as he was concerned, too, that was one of the highlights of his life.
There's no doubt about it in my humble estimation.
No. So a very memorable year. The purse that year was $27,500. It's starting to move up now.
Okay.
And the
what was the top money?
Well, that's what the top money was, I guess.
Oh, sure, $27,500. Yeah.
$185,000 was the total purse.
Gosh, we were getting close to that $200,000 mark.
Yeah. So you're moving up.
And still doing it without a title sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think I may have mentioned this before. We were able to create money inside the golf tournament by selling sponsorships of special events, getting soda, underwriters, getting beer sponsor. All these things happened within, but we still didn't have that big check at the top that was going to help us jump to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So we were blessed to have a cameraman. I would just we have a cameraman. We were blessed to have a guy from Texas move to Springfield, who was with Coca-Cola. Came from Houston. Came from the Houston Golf Association, which was one of the best PGA organizations in the country on the PGA Tour. And Curtis Tillett, and I think we've got a picture of Curtis and me from one of the magazines. It'll come up sometime. Said that we need to get Coca-Cola involved, and so not only were they the soft drink sponsor, they sponsored the Pro-Am for a few years, and that gave us the impetus to realize that we could sell these sponsorships. After that, one of the banks took it on for a few years, and then when that bank left us, then we had a co-sponsorship between IBM and LRS. So we kept that ball rolling, and that was in the $25,000 range, which we didn't see a lot of checks that big back in those years. I used to say in those beginning years that I'd get up, every November 1 and start rubbing our nickels together, because that's all we had were zeros across the board.
So $25,000 was reason to celebrate, I would think.
Oh, yes, and probably one that I was not very well celebrated for was the first time I went to Milwaukee and got a beer sponsor. And of course, everybody wants Budweiser or Miller or all those great things. And the one I could get up to put up the $25,000 was, I don't know whether I should say it or not, Pabst Blue Ribbon. And I took a terrible hammering by my beer drinking board members. But I said,
does that mean they weren't Pabst drinkers?
Oh no, but they knew the mission, and they put up with it. But they gave me an awful hard time for many years, because I had a great contact with Pabst. He was a great guy, and he kept that ball rolling for a long time. And that was big money to us. But
Well, considering the alternative, well, there's no sponsor or there's...
Well, yeah. I mean, they had no argument at all. We just brought home a check for $25,000, and I walked into that. I walked into the Pabst brewery absolutely cold and met this gentleman, absolutely cold, and said, "I've got a tournament, and you need to do it."
Well, maybe it helped that you were a good German girl and your dad used to run a bar.
Yeah.
I don't suppose that came up in the discussion, did it?
Well, it might have. You know, I'm sure that I know my father handled Pabst Blue Ribbon. There's no doubt in my mind.
Let's move on here. 1986, Betsy wins again. So 85 and 86,
Yes.
Betsy King.
Yes.
And that was the sponsorship year that you got Pabst Blue Ribbon that you just talked about. 87, Rosie Jones. And
That was a big win. She beat Nancy Lopez, and it was her first win. So I can still see her running across the green and jumping into her caddy's arms, and him twirling her around. Well, we saw a lot of that over the years, but Rosie, she's very slightly built, and she literally flew through the air, and that was big. And she subsequently became a very big star on the tour.
well, it didn't hurt then. You've got this upcoming star against
Yeah.
the legend of the game.
And a very gracious second place finisher. She was probably as excited for Rosie as Rosie was for Rosie. That was just Nancy. That was just Nancy.
Well, that says a lot about her,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah. One thing about Rosie that I wish could have been different was she didn't feel the allegiance to the tournament that I felt a past champion should feel. That's my personal feeling, that if you took top money out of a golf tournament, that you should feel that it would help that tournament if I would go back on a regular basis. Not every year, but maybe every other year. Rosie, somebody that I had to work on of course she came back and defended, but as her career grew in stature, we saw less and less of her, which was very painful to me. I couldn't believe it.
Was that attitude of loyalty to particular tournaments something that most of the tournament players would develop as part of the professional unwritten ethics of their...
Well, look at Betsy King. Now, certainly, she didn't just win twice. She's the only three-time champion of the golf tournament. And she came back every year. Now, what really helped that scenario, and it helps in other situations too, is she developed a family relationship with Mr. Sapp's daughter and son-in-law. And she, throughout her career, has stayed with them, the Collins, Bill and Lois Collins. As a matter of fact, I don't know if it was a year she was leading or not, but I remember it was the year that we lost the Pro-Am to rain, and we were over there trying to deal with the fact that we are not going to be able to play the rail that day. You could not get up Clubhouse Drive; it was underwater. The media was going crazy. The Pro-Am players were calling, and we're on the air telling people to stay away. We'll make some announcements. In the meantime, I'm on the phone with Lacey Brooks at the Holiday Inn. I'm on the phone with the Convention and Visitors, or the Convention Center. I'm on the phone trying to move all these events that are supposed to happen at the golf course, with the exception of the play, to other venues. And I get a phone call from Bill Collins, where Betsy is staying. They're on their way to the hospital because Betsy has just sliced her finger with a bagel cutter. I believe she was defending that year. So in the middle of that, we've got that. So
That can't be good for your golf swing either.
well, she was able to play the tournament. And I believe it was this finger. I think it was a middle finger. But she played. She didn't withdraw. Now, a lot of players probably would have withdrawn with an injury. But that particular year was one that I remember every detail, because if I ever saw, and I wrote a letter to the editor about a community that came together to save some very important events. Lacey Brooks, well, one of the things I had to ask him was because we had, at that point in time, all kinds of liquid refreshment sponsors. And could we bring all of those liquids into the Holiday Inn East in their big, well, we actually wanted to do it poolside where they had all the games and stuff. And he said, let me get back to you on that. So he gets a call. Obviously, he called his insurance company, and then he said, I have to know from your insurance company. So now I'm calling Bill Collins again because Bill Collins had all the insurance. And so we got all that worked out, and I said, now can you feed 400 people, 400 to 500 people lunch, sandwich buffet? They got all that put together. In the meantime, we're talking to the convention center about the pork producers being able to bring in their grills and their pork, what's that called? Their steaks, the pork.
Pork loins?
No, it's got a special name. I can't remember it, but it'll come. The tape's rolling. They were very popular. They had just come out, and they were like this big around and this thick. And the pork producers actually brought their own people in, the farmers that provided the pork, and grilled them, and we served them. So we had to find a place in the convention center where we could do the dinner. So after I got all these things rolling, I took the committee, and I think Mike Durr was tournament chairman that year. And I took Mike and a couple of other board members. I said, now, this is the event you've got. And then I took 3 more, and I said, this is the event you've got. And I took the other 3 and said, you've got the convention center. And it was up to them to work all the logistics of that. And then, of course, the players didn't get to play golf. So all the pros came out to the Holiday Inn and gave lessons, talked, autographs. We got their pro-am pictures taken. And Beth Daniel was giving a swing instruction. She had a microphone and everything. And she said, Sandy, come up here. Now, you got to remember, I wasn't much of a golfer back then, and I'm still not, but it was worse. And Beth says, gave me a 5-iron. And she said, so she told me to take a swing, and then she showed me a couple things, and she said, take another swing, and I did. And she says, I've got it. She says, take a week off and quit. Of course, the place just went up for grabs. That was just... Nancy Lopez was there, my good friend Joanne Washam, Betsy didn't make it because she was at the hospital getting stitches, I might add. But that was a great day, and Pat Bradley was there, a 2-time champion. I mean, they all rose to the occasion.
You mentioned that these players would come and they'd stay with the same families.
Yes.
Oftentimes.
Local housing is very, very, very important, especially for the rookies, the ones that weren't making the big bucks, if 15,000 could be called making the big bucks.
Well, I'm dying to know how you matched the people up in the first place.
Well, a player would sign up, either call the office or fill out a form for what we call local housing. And we would have a local housing chairman, and they would just there were prerequisites. They had to have their own bedroom, their own bathroom. Back in the early days, that family also had to provide transportation and bring the players back and forth because we only had a handful of transportation cars and they only ran back and forth to the hotels. Actually, the Hilton, only one hotel. So if you were staying someplace else, if you hadn't rented a car or whatever, you were out of luck. And sometimes the player would say, can I bring my dog, or can I bring my caddy, or can I bring my husband? Those were all things that the committee worked out. And sometimes a family would take 2 players. Now, Betsy just happened, I believe, to get paired with the Collins family. They may have known her ahead of time. I don't know that. But it lasted. It lasted for 30 years.
It sounds like whatever that relationship was, that was vitally important to bring them back the following years as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We always thought that we had a good hook with Annika because she also established a great relationship with a family here that actually also had a condo at the rail, as the Collins did. And but that didn't work out that way. She came back a few times, but not enough. Excuse me.
Where were we? I think we got up to 1988. That was the third win for Betsy.
Okay.
And so it was 85, 86, skipping a year in 88.
Called her King of the Rail.
And why not?
And why not?
And then 1989 is Beth Daniel.
Beth's first win, one of two. She also, I believe, came back, won back-to-backs. She was a big star. Beth had some really serious back problems early in her career that we really thought were career-ending, and she got that straightened out and became quite a force on the LPGA Tour. And we were proud, so proud to have her as a champion. And she went on to a fabulous career and is now announcing. She's doing some media work.
Well, just to refresh your memory, that was the year that you guys had to move inside for the Pro-Am.
Okay, all right.
And the total purse that year was now up to $250,000.
Oh, wow.
And her cut was $45,000.
Hey!
So I think we're getting into serious money now.
And still no title sponsor.
Yeah.
I know I sound like a broken record, but I don't think anybody can really appreciate how important getting a serious chunk of money was at that point in time. At the same time, we were developing special events. We were starting to build skyboxes that were a marketing entity, something that we could generate more money, giving sponsors more exposure for their companies, because every skybox had a sign in front of it at who was there. So even though we were able to raise prices and charge for parking and try to keep the ticket prices reasonable, you were always looking at the bottom line. Our goal in those early years was to try to have the tournament in the bank. In other words, have the expenses in the bank before the gate. However, that didn't happen, and the gate was very, very critical. And a lot of the LPGA and other tournaments didn't understand why we weren't giving away flushes of tickets. Now, that's what was happening before my time. I was told that anybody's desk drawer, business desk drawer in Springfield, could open up and the tickets for the tournament would fall out. So we, the board, and I shut down on that immediately, and that was one of John Holmeyer's things about giving us the $50,000 was we're going to stop giving all the tickets away. So the gate became very critical, and tournaments with title sponsors didn't need the gate. We desperately needed it, and it wasn't till many years down the line that we were able to meet getting the expenses paid before we opened, but we still charged at the gate.
I'm thinking, though, that there's quite a balancing act, because I'm sure the motivation for handing out all those free tickets to begin with was to fill out the gallery, to get people to show up, so it wouldn't be embarrassing for the players and everybody else that you had empty golf courses.
I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know what that was all about, but I think that if you bought a Pro-Am or you bought a $250 package, you got 50 or 75 tickets. Well, that just doesn't make any sense. But it was so new to all of them that, and the LPGA didn't come in and tell them how. There was no scrap or book, to show them you do it this way, this way, this. All they cared about was that the purse money was there, that their clients were being paid.
So you and the board got to fly this thing by the seat of your pants.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Well, let's get back to our timeline here. 1990, Beth won for the second year. 91, Pat Bradley.
That was her second win.
And a $60,000 purse for her.
Yeah.
So that's substantial.
That was also one of the times that we had to delay and play on the next day.
Well, I think this is also an important year, and you told me the story before uh, that you went from $300,000 to $400,000.
Oh, was that the year we did that?
Tell us about that.
Well,
Because you still don't have a title
no,
sponsor.
and your rule of thumb is to try and stay competitive. This was my rule of thumb. To try to stay competitive within the tournaments that surround you. I don't care what they played for in February and March and April. We start looking at purses in mid-June through July up to and after our tournament to see how we fit in the purse picture. So I'm doing my homework, and I realized that purses are really starting to soar around us. And I said to the executive committee, we really, really need a $100,000 purse increase. We need to get to $400,000. And so we decided to make that commitment to the LPGA for the schedule. And I can remember going to the tournament sponsors meeting in October, and I think, I don't know if I was still on their board then or not, but the schedule was out and it showed us at 400,000, and all my friends wanted to know, who'd you get? Don't have anybody. How are you going to do it? Don't know. But I came back home, and we developed what we called a corporate caddy, and then it's the only. It was the first time that we employed agency to help us put a presentation together, and they actually drew a little cartoonish caddy with the golf bag, and that was our corporate caddy. In other words, the caddy would help carry the money load to help us get better. And we invited all the presidents, CEOs, leaders to a cocktail party, and every businessman that came in got a loose leaf notebook, their name on it, the name of their company and their name, and inside was the whole program. This is what we need, and of course we did a presentation and told them why we needed it. And our goal was to get 4 $25,000 sponsors. And we came out of there that night with 4, which was totally amazing.
What would have happened had you not achieved that?
I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have had a job next year. I don't know, but it was a big leap. And actually, we had those sponsors right up until the big date time.
Well, we're getting closer to that.
I know we are.
1991, Laura Davies wins. She plays a record 10
No,
under.
Laura never won. Laura,
Well, I'm sorry.
she set the course record.
Pat
Bradley
Bradley won, and
Yeah.
Laura Davies played a 10 under par during that tournament.
That's right, and set a record. And that was the year that we had to hold it over a day. And I can remember, and only the players I think there were like only 5 or 6 players that had to come back the next day that had a possibility of winning. And Pat won, and I can remember on the green, and we had quite a few people out there. We certainly didn't have a huge gallery. It was a work day. And she got on her cell phone. Whenever Pat won a golf tournament, her mother would ring a cowbell hanging out on their back porch. And she had no sooner got through with all the presentations than out came the cell phone, and she said, "You can ring that bell, Mama." So,
did you know what she was talking about at the time?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Pat, great champion, good friend. Actually, I had the good fortune of going to both, actually 3 Hall of Fame investitures. I went to Nancy Lopez, which was at Tiffany's in New York City.
Wow.
I went
She doesn't seem like a Tiffany's girl.
Well, you know, the LPGA didn't quite know what they were doing then either, so they had it in Tiffany's. And as a matter of fact, my daughter Liz was living and working in New York then. My daughter Liz and I were actually, I believe, on CNN being interviewed about being there. And Nancy was so surprised, and she gave me a big hug, and she said it was like having her mother there, which was really,
Wow.
really, really something. And then we went to Pat Bradley's. Liz was living in Boston then, so I went out and stayed with Liz and went to Pat Bradley's in Boston and got to meet all of her wonderful brothers and her mother, and that was a great night. And I also went to Beth Daniels in South Carolina. So, those something that was very, very neat and full of happy memories.
I suspect you remember then who won in 1992.
Mm-hmm.
Her second win.
My good friend Nancy Lopez.
Was that a special win for her after so many years of not
winning?
winning?
Oh, was it ever? Oh, she was so excited. She, too, ran across the green. And the putter went flying, and she ran across the green and came down on her leg wrong and had to be taken to the hospital. She was so happy. You got to that stage of the game where you wondered where the next wins were going to come, and I think the fact that it happened here, it happened at the rail, which she had been so faithful to over the years, that there was never a time that I called Nancy and asked her to help me that she didn't respond. I think I told you all those stories in prior tapings, but she a unique. I think I may have said this too, but Nancy Lopez was one of the stars of the LPGA that deserved every accolade that came her way because of what she gives back and continues to give back to this day. She's a unique individual.
Well, we're finally up to the point we've been alluding to a lot here, 1993.
Da, 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 da.
And before we talk about the tournament
Okay.
that year, I think we need to talk about the accomplishment of landing a title sponsor.
Well, you asked me when we started this particular interview about what my goals were. We were approaching my very important heart's desire for the Rail Charity Classic, and that was the title sponsor, knowing full well that that's what it was going to take to get into the next century, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And 91, we had a board member from Bloomington who just happened to be my husband's second cousin, who I sang at her wedding.
None of that hurts.
Well, her husband, Glenn, worked for State Farm. And Brenda said, Sandy, you need to come up and meet Bruce Callis. I said, hey, got car, will travel anywhere, anytime, set it up. I mean, always willing to meet anybody. And so they set it up, and Brenda and I met with Mr. Callis, who was
Okay, go ahead.
his vice president, and one of the areas of State Farm that he was over was marketing. And so that was the area that we wanted to talk about, marketing State Farm through sponsorship of the tournament. And yes, he was well aware of the tournament, and he had about 12 reasons why they would not take on the title, and maybe one reason why they might. And in that next year, he sent Bob Pickerel, who was a State Farm regional fellow based here in Springfield, and he started buying up inventory. Now, as I think I explained before, inventory is pro-ams, tickets, advertising. And it was actually 91 and 92 Bob Pickerel came to our office and started looking at things that State Farm could do. The second time I met with Bruce in the fall of 92, he was down to about 8 reasons why they might not and 4 reasons why they might. So we were going in that direction. In 93, we got the sense that things were really moving along, and Bob was again in our office, and Bruce was wanting to see what we might be looking for. Now, there was no standardized contract. The LPGA had no standardized contract for title sponsorship of a LPGA golf tournament. Again, seat of our pants. What can we put together? Knowing full well that if we could make it all those years without State Farm that what we needed was a purse boost, but if we didn't ask them for the purse, we couldn't give them all the pro-ams. Many, many, many title sponsors take the bulk of the pro-ams, whereas the pro-ams to us put the purse together. So it was a balancing act. What do we need to go forward? What can we give them that? So I'm playing with all these numbers and all these different inventory items, and I went up to see Bruce in October again with the first look at what we thought was going to happen, and here was our thinking. And when I left there that day, there were 11 reasons why they might and 1 reason why they might not. Now, to understand this whole process, the State Farm they were doing their marketing research. They move very deliberately, and this is something that I learned to appreciate throughout the years that I was fortunate enough to work with them. And there were 3 top executives that had to sign off on this. Bruce was the forward-moving youngest of them, and it's something that he felt was going to be a good fit for State Farm, especially when they were entering into addressing marketing to women.
Oh.
So here we are. And the next thing is we're invited to make a presentation to a board table of executives, State Farm executives, that you folks can't see this room, but it was as big as this room, a big square table. And there they all sat. And I took the chairman of the board was Jack Clark, publisher of the newspaper, and the president of the board was Bill Foster, my beloved friend who's no longer with us, and Curtis Tillett, who I believe was tournament chairman. And Curtis came up with the idea that we should have these T-shirts made. So we even got the publisher of the State Journal-Register to put on this T-shirt over his shirt and tie, and we all had trench coats. So when we went in, we all lined up, and we flashed them, opened our trench coats, and it said State Farm Rail Classic. And that just set the tone for the whole, I mean, you know, they laughed, they clapped. It was, I'll never forget it. There we stood, flashing all the executives of State Farm. That was a real trial by fire for me, because my dear friends on the executive committee left me to answer all the questions that were coming our way. And I remember at one point I said, you know, gentlemen, you can chime in anytime. And Jack says, you're doing just fine. Keep it up. Well, after we got all the questions answered, Bruce asked the final question. And remember, this is November. And he said, when do we have to make this decision? Of course, in the back of my mind, I'm saying we've been 3 years trying to make this decision. I hope we're closer than that. But the bottom line and facts were that the LPGA comes out with its schedule of events for the next year in December.
At which time the purse is announced?
Yes, it was. And so I had to explain to them that if you want the benefit of a full year's worth of advertising, and you're going to be in Golf Week, you're going to be in Golf Digest, you're going to be in Golf World, you're going to be in Golf News, it's going to say State Farm Rail Classic. If we don't do that, they will not go back and rename it. It will be the Rail Charity Classic. So that gave them a timeline, and we all left feeling pretty good. In the meantime, Dottie Pepper called me personally and asked me if I would come to her Player of the Year luncheon in New York. And again, Liz was in New York. It was an excuse for me to go visit my daughter and be with Dottie, and because her parents weren't there. And while I was gone, I flew to New York for lunch, and I flew home. I mean, it was a one-day, and I got back into the office the next morning, and my secretary then, my assistant, was a former school teacher, Kay LaRosa, and she had drawn this big poster board with the LPGA, with the State Farm logo on it. She drew it. Had the
Freehand.
freehand. It was in red and white. And it said, "How does it feel to be insured by the very best?" Well, you never saw anybody cry like I cried. Scared her to death. I mean, I went to pieces. And she kept saying, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I said, "You don't get it, Kay."
It felt pretty darn good,
Oh,
huh?
my gosh. Oh, I was a basket case. Well, she said, he wants you to call because they want to talk about the fee. And I thought, boy, I have paired this to the best I can, giving them the inventory and things that they should have that were taken out of our ability to market because of the big package. And I thought, I can't go any lower. And well, she said, he's going to call you. He's gone somewhere. He's going to call you next week. So I had a whole week to worry and worry, you know. But I had pretty much made up my mind by the time he called. And I just told him we couldn't, that really the price at this point was non-negotiable. And we had to have.
What was the price on the table?
I believe, now don't hold me to this, but I believe it was $325,000.
That's what they would have to put up to be the title sponsor.
Yes. And you have to understand what goes into that. And it wasn't a one-year deal, Mark, because it doesn't make any sense to change your whole look. New logos, new stationery, new everything for 1 year.
But I would guess that $325,000 was for a one-year commitment. I mean, that wasn't to be stretched over several years.
3 years. But we negotiated the purse every year. So if we wanted, they were responsible for the purse increases. So we moved it to $500,000 to $500,000 their first year. And Nancy Lopez was defending. And I will never, ever forget, Charlie Meacham was the commissioner then. We did this big cocktail party at Christmas time to make the announcement, because after we got the November commitments, the logo had to be designed, everything had to be put together. And Bruce Callis was very close to the governor, Governor Edgar then, and I had introduced State Farm to, they were talking about TV immediately, which was like a blow to me, because I thought, well, we'll get the title sponsor, but TV will come later. And all of a sudden, Bruce is immediately asking me about TV. I had Larry Cirillo, who was an Emmy-winning NBC producer, fly in that night. And Larry, I've known Larry for years because he was doing a lot of golf across the tour. And he said, "I have never seen anything in my life what Sandy Wheeler did with that announcement of the title sponsor. She had the governor, she had this." He said it was unbelievable, and it was. It was such a joyous night. The ballroom was full. It was Christmas time, the celebration, but the commissioner was Charlie Meacham.
Commissioner of?
The LPGA.
Okay.
And when it was his turn to talk, he stood up and he said, "Now you have to understand, we have just brought a Fortune 500 company to the LPGA family. They didn't have a lot of those." And the commissioner was there, and he said, "Anybody that's got State Farm for a title sponsor and Nancy Lopez defending is on a roll." And the place went up for grabs. I have never grinned so much in my life, or so many hugs. And we, we rolled the thing back so they could see. We had the old logo, and then we turned it back because it was still under wraps. I mean, this was something that we wanted to keep under wraps, but it was a really, really, really big deal.
Pretty good Christmas that year, it sounds like.
Oh my. And I got to start working with professionals in producing. You know, you're not going to do my little fly-by-night brochures when you're talking with State Farm. So Bruce put at my disposal
this is what you go to now, right?
That's a good example of something that we did over the years. First class, and I had you know, they're artists, and they're this picture that's here behind me was shot after Bruce died, and their media department took this in. This is known as the Bruce Callis Trophy now, because after we lost Bruce, we all wanted him never to be forgotten within the tournament. So it's the Bruce Callis Trophy, and they would bring in live flowers and shoot this. This is the type of thing that State Farm did. I mean, first class all the way, and we felt a responsibility to honor our commitment to them by slowly but surely bringing the rail up to a first class tournament, and I think we succeeded.
Talk about that evolution, because you've mentioned it to me offline, if you will, about some of the additions, some of the benefits of having that kind of relationship in terms of how it looked out on the golf course itself.
Well, I was always very concerned about how we looked, the physical presentation. I cared a lot about that, but there were also things that I thought would enhance our look, but there was no way we were going to expend the money to put those things out that were just purely aesthetics. So after we got the whole ball rolling, Bruce asked me one day, what's your heart's desire? What have you always wanted for the golf tournament that you don't have?
Boy, that's a great question that you don't
I'm
expect.
telling you, no. I have another really neat story about this, too. I said, I have always wanted a float in the lake off of 17. There's a big, big lake out there, and I wanted something out there that, so they built a big, beautiful float that before I left, we had 3 floats in 3 lakes at the rail. And they got designers and brought in people to build it. But the neatest part every year was State Farm employees came in and put it in the lake, got their waders on or not their waders, and they were in mud up to their necks. I mean, that ops crew that State Farm provided for us was such a treasure because, number one, they were such great personalities and so much fun, and it was all for one and one for all. And every year, well, the first few years we had the coordinator was the same person, and then we started moving through different people. As a matter of fact, funny story, the first year we had media day when State Farm was coming in, Bill Foster had the coordinator that I had been working with, Pashhold was her name, was her last name, and she was riding with Foz in the golf, and he made a quick turn and threw her out of the golf cart, and I'm going, oh,
Oops.
Lord, now we're killing the staff, you know. They were hands off when it came to the running of the golf tournament. It was, what can we do for you? I know for a fact that title sponsors across the tour over the years would take the bulk of the pro-ams, and that wasn't what we could do to keep their price that they were comfortable with, that we were comfortable with. They never asked for anything. They never asked to see a budget, but our budget was on record. If they had wanted, they could have gone to the state of Illinois and looked at, you know, by then we were being audited. Mm-hmm. Bruce never said, bring me your budget. I want to look at it. Nobody did. It was the most amazing experience. But after that first year, he called me and said, I just want to thank you for teaching us how to be a title sponsor, which absolutely, that's the way they were. And it's such a blessing for a tournament to be able to run its own show. And 60 miles away is a company saying, here's my hand, what can we do to help? And it was that way every year I was there with them.
Was that the other story that you wanted to mention?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty special.
It was
I'm
touching.
sure you're thanking us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bruce was the most accessible CEO. I don't care where he was. If I had an issue that I wanted to speak with him, they would call him. He called me from Hawaii one night, and we chatted just like he was sitting in the living room with me. That's just the way he was. And when we lost him at age 59, it was a terrible, terrible blow to State Farm, to his tournament family, and that's what we considered ourselves. State Farm and the tournament has been a family for a lot of years, and we pray that it will go on for a lot of years. But it was, and that's when we developed the Bruce Callis Scholarship, and when we named the trophy forever, as long as it is, it will be the Bruce Callis Trophy. State Farm asked me what we thought we wanted, and Bruce Callis on that trophy meant everything. Now that's another thing that they provide. They provide the trophy, they provide the plaques, the things that they do for the tournament outside the title sponsorship contract is overwhelming and amazing. And I remember when we got to the point that it was time. You know, here we were trying to hold our Pro-Am costs down, trying to hold our ticket, not raising our prices. But as you know, and everybody knows it's in business, the costs were still going up. And it became time to ask State Farm for the purse. And that was a toughie.
To take the whole purse.
But I did it.
How many years were you into the relationship?
It was when the purse was $1 million. So we had been $500,000 over the years. I can't tell you what year it was. I think it was 3 years before I left, as a matter of fact. But every year, I would talk to the vice president of media, which was Tom, and he'd call me and he'd say, "How much do you want?" And I said, "Well, I haven't done my review yet." But he was the greatest guy, and you know, they accepted my interpretation of where we needed to be, and it was a wonderful relationship for me personally. I miss them all tremendously, but they're still friends.
When did Bruce pass away?
He was 59 years old, and it was the year that he was named to the business leaders for the LPGA. I could look in the media guide and tell you, oh, it's on here. I can't see it, but this is, can you see it?
Well,
It'll tell you the year. It says Remembering Bruce.
Well, it's awfully hard to read.
Yeah,
I'm
because
afraid.
I've been running.
98, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
This was a gift from State Farm, and it's a golf green with a diamond, and I don't take it off. He was my mentor. He was my hero, and I'll never forget him.
That's 93, a big year, an important year.
Oh, and it was so much fun to see it come together like that.
You know, I started by asking you, when do you feel like you arrived? I'm thinking that maybe 1993 you had a certain sense of that.
More than that, because my long-term goals were both title sponsor, but then the ever-elusive television. You know, when can we get Springfield on TV? Now, again, I talked to my friends, my counterparts, my peers, about having television. They say, no, really, it's not all that it's cut out to be. There are problems.
Are you talking about other
events? Yeah, they're in tournament business. And, you know, I'd say, oh, I really want television. And they say, you know, once they come in, they're going to run your show. You're not going to like it, you know. Well, Bruce says...
That sounds to me like it's somewhat self-serving on their part, though.
Well, a little bit, but come to find out over the years that it's very true. And I know we're not going to talk about that today, but it had a lot to do with date changes. So when Bruce said, we're thinking about putting together a cable channel hookup, not ESPN or not network, he said, you know, what can you do to help? And that's when I brought Larry Cirillo in, and that started the ball rolling. And the next thing I know, we not only have a title sponsor, but we're on the air the first year. And I, of course, sat there and bawled when we hit the air. I'm known as the ball baby of the LPGA. And old tough me, you know, see what I'm saying? So he brings this to us, and I'm thinking, I've got it. Now, where do I go from here? Really, I mean, it called for reestablishing goals, because everything I had hoped and dreamed for this golf tournament was there. Now, was it there for just 3 years? We had a 2-year option on the 3 years, which was immediately picked up. And once we got into the first option year, we started going forward. And eventually, I said, well, let's cut out the option years. Let's just make it a 5-year. And it wasn't for quite a while until we had to start moving from the top. Here's the purse increases, but we were also needing more operational money. So the things were constantly, what was on the initial contract was never quite the way it was, because they were always there to help.
There's always new challenges, aren't there?
Yes. Yes.
Let's move on. 1994, and I'm afraid I'm going to pronounce this name incorrectly. Barb
Mucha.
Mucha.
Mucha. She was a young lady that was thinking about that summer quitting the tour. And she thought, no, I think I'll just go play Springfield. I'm not going to go until I go play Springfield.
She'd been there before.
Yeah. And she was so stunned to win that when I was hugging her, she didn't recognize me. Oh, she says, oh, it's Sandy. And it was a resurgence of her career. And she's one neat woman. Barb was a great champion for us, and you know, Bruce always took time to sit down with the champions, and of course that was I think that was that couldn't be a 98. It wasn't that. I'm thinking about what's on here, because I remember Barb winning 94, and I believe Bruce was sick then. He was sick for almost over a year and a half before. It was pancreatic, but she was a delight. But I'll tell you the one that was. I want to jump ahead. Where are we going from here?
Jump ahead.
Well, I'm thinking about.
We'll track back.
I'm thinking about when Mary Beth Zimmerman won. That's got to be in there somewhere.
Well, she was the next year, 1995.
See, I thought so. Now that was a really, really neat story. Here she holds the 8-hole scoring record on the tour, and her father had just been through colon cancer surgery. Now remember, she's a Central Illinois girl. She's from Hillsboro. Her father was also a retired State Farm executive.
Oh, perfect.
Not sure what his level was, but he was State Farm. She was State Farm, you know, obviously. And I don't know who she was tied with. I'm trying to think. But we went into playoff holes, and the way we do it is when you're in a playoff hole and you're going out on the golf course. Yeah, because Bruce was sick then, because we ran him around like a crazy man from hole to hole. He was in my cart. We went out. We usually play 18 over again, the finishing hole. And then you go out and you play 17 and 18. Well, we got out to 17, and I can see who that other person is, but I'm not going there, because I'm looking at Mary Beth's putt, and I'm thinking 17 downhill slider par 3. I mean, going right down towards the water was her putt, and a slider, meaning it had to take a curve to get in the hole. And she sank that putt, and it was unbelievable. First of all, that she would even come and play. I mean, her dad was just out of, and she had decided, and she's been interviewed about this, that it was something she could do for her dad. And it was televised. She'd never played the tournament that her dad wasn't there, but he was there watching it on television. So it was a big, big time, and I'm racing Bruce out with the trophy and getting it for TV. Any other time, we'd have taken everybody back to the 18th green, which we did too, and did it for the gallery. But TV isn't going to do that for you. You've got to take the trophy, take the personnel out there, do it there. TV cameras go off, then you get in the cars and race back up to the 18th green and do it all over again. Every year, if you had to do something else, and it was all a timing thing. You know, are they going to hold over if we're in playoff? And that was always your desire. So lots of fun things with TV.
That was also the 20th anniversary.
That was the year of the volunteer.
The year of the volunteer. And weren't you honored that year as well?
Yeah, that was very nice. We had a contest. We had a logo contest throughout Central Illinois. I said, let's let some other people send in some ideas for an anniversary logo. And it was the one we picked was an agency out of Decatur, and we gave them advertising and tickets and stuff, but they didn't get paid anything. It was just, so it was the 20th anniversary year of the volunteer. And everything, I wasn't a volunteer, but my tournament and the LPGA honored me greatly.
Surprised you?
Oh my, did they surprise me. I mean, the tournament gave me a crystal, Waterford crystal water, or champagne bucket. They gave me a check for $1 million that they made sure it said you're wanting $1 million, don't take it to cash. And then they also gave me a framed poster of Pearl Sin, who had won the year before. That she wrote this very sweet message, and she was there to give it to me. Lots of hugs and pictures, and then that was at the volunteer party that night. And on the 18th green the next day, the LPGA commissioner was then Ty Votah, and the LPGA gave me my Rolex, and it's engraved on the back. It says 20 great years with the LPGA. It was very, very, very special.
Practically everything you're wearing has
Yes.
a lot of significance
Yep.
today.
Yep. How can I leave it after all those years?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just part of me.
Well, we need to move on. 'cause
Okay.
The clock
Yeah.
is running. 1996, Michelle McCann.
McGann,
McGann.
Michelle McGann.
97 was Cindy Fig Courier.
First win for Cindy, and I think we've got a picture of Cindy again with Bill Foster, who
Okay.
was chairman of the board.
Okay.
Bill Foster was one of the great heroes of the tournament. Went through all the chairs, and he was at this point was chairman of the board and stayed that for some time. And Cindy Fig Courier is one of the great personalities. I'm trying to remember what her nickname was. Her nickname was Trash Queen, because she can get up and down from anywhere on the golf course. That's what the players called her, the Trash Queen. but that's the way it was. You know, Big Mama, Trash Queen. They all had nicknames.
She doesn't look like Trash Queen.
Oh,
to
she's
me.
a darling person with two beautiful little girls, and it was always fun when the players would come with their kids, and that grew more and more over the years. And at one point we were required to provide child care, and that has continued on through the years.
97. I did want to mention $600,000 for the total purse and $90,000 for her.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad cut.
No, not at all.
Even in today's dollars, that would be a bad cut.
When you figure, I'm trying to remember when I'd have to look at the media guide to see when we went back to 72 holes. But anyway, you crack it 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 rounds of golf is
Yeah.
not a bad way to go.
We've got about 15 minutes left, so
Really?
we need to race through the rest of
Okay,
these
all
years.
right.
And there's so much more to talk about.
Oh dear.
1998, Pearl Sin won. And this is the perfect opportunity. I know we've got a picture of Pearl here we can show.
Yeah.
And,
She's a sweetheart, darling girl.
and I think it's also got Mi Young Kim, because here's the time now when you begin to see the nature of the players change, and now you've got the international players, and especially the Orientals, in particular
Pearl's American born.
the Koreans.
Yeah, Pearl Sin is American born, and Mi Hyun Kim was a rookie, straight out of South Korea, and could not speak a word of English. And we were, you know, Saeri Pak was the player that first made her mark from South Korea. Lovely young woman. As a matter of fact, the year that the LPGA honored Bruce before he passed away, Saeri was the was the Rookie of the Year, and we did all that at the in New York City at the Plaza. That was quite a year too.
How did well, talk a little bit more about how the player field is changing.
Oh.
What that meant to the
Well,
tournament.
Kimmy, we call her, or her nickname is Peanut, Mi-Hyun Kim,
Okay.
could not speak a word of English. She might have been able to say hello while we said Ohio, and she had an interpreter with her who she spoke to him and he spoke in the microphone. As the year progressed, and of course I had to make plans for her media day visit with her manager and with the LPGA, because all of a sudden we're dealing with an Asian player that speaks no English, and you have to figure out dates she can come. You look at her schedule, yada yada yada, and when she came for media day, Luann Johnson, who's been on the board and tournament chairman and everything for years, kind of took it upon herself to force Kimmy to speak English. You can do it, you can do it. And as it progressed, and when she came back to defend, we wouldn't let her beg off. We just really encouraged her, which was a fun thing for us. Mm-hmm. We weren't being harsh with her, and she got a big kick out of it, but she had an interpreter with her. Big impact. Mark, the biggest impact of the Asian players coming on in such great numbers is that many of them are really great players, and they are eligible to play in the Pro-Am. Now, how you know who plays in the Pro-Am is the top 56 via the current LPGA money list are eligible, are required to play in the Pro-Am unless they would call our office and specifically ask to be excused. And that would be our decision.
That's where the language barrier really came to bear then?
Of course, because they are out on the golf course with 4 people, not necessarily men and women, who have paid upwards of $1,000. Some tournaments are $10,000. The LPGA Championship is $22,000 per person, and they can't speak English. Or another issue that we had was some that wouldn't. Now, that was a bigger issue with me, and I know names, but I'm not going to share them. But their caddy would go to the team and say, she's going to walk on the other side of the fairway from the team, and that's where she'll stay, except when you have to come together and please don't speak to her. Now, that's a problem. And I believe it's one that the LPGA is trying to address, but they certainly didn't go about it in the right way.
Well, you're alluding to this incident that just happened this year, where the LPGA for a time said, no, you have to be able to speak English to play the tour. You
have, I think it was 2 years to learn, and then they had to go take English classes, etc.
Did they back off on that?
They had to. They had to. State Farm was quite vocal about the methodology that was introduced in requiring the Asians to speak English, or any foreign player to speak English.
Well, looking at the tournament field this year, the incredible diversity, Europe, Asia, South America,
Sweden, absolutely, Germany.
And I got to believe that you're elevating the bar in terms of the quality of the play here as well.
Well, without a doubt, and now the Japanese have taken fire again, and we're seeing more. We had 2 great players out of Japan, but then that kind of settled down, and it just kind of slid over to South Korea. So this isn't going to go away. And it is, I just read the LPGA schedule this morning for 2009, and they have 32, and I'm not remember the exact number, but 10 tournaments are going to be played internationally this year. They're going to be in Mexico, They're going to be in Thailand. They're going to be in Singapore. They're going to be in South Korea. They're going to be in England. They're going to be, what am I missing? 2 in Mexico. Oh, 2 in England. So
France.
there's 4. Yeah, France, Avion, $3.2 million. You know, and here again, I was looking to see what the purse levels were around us, and whereby they've changed dates again this year to enhance attendance.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see that it's going to work.
Hmm.
Now, that's just what I would like to think, qualified opinion.
We can talk about that in the last
Yes,
session.
we will.
And there's a lot to talk about there, I know. 2000, where were we?
2000,
1999
yep.
was Mi Young Kim.
Yep.
2000 was Laurel King,
Mm-hmm.
and that's your 25th anniversary year.
Yeah.
Kate Golden in 2001.
Yes.
Jump in here if there's a story in the back of
Well,
this.
Laurel Keene was also a first-time winner, and that, I believe, the only tournament she's won, and has not extended her career. Kate Golden, she's just a honey. She's a Texas girl, and she is just absolutely more fun than a barrel of monkeys. And she beat, who did she beat that year? Annika.
Oh.
Yeah, that was quite the story. She beat Annika. I love her anyway.
was there a playoff that year, as you recall? or
No.
just came
Nope.
down to the wire.
Yeah, she shot a lights out round, and you know that's what it takes, especially at the rail. They'll tell you, the rail is known as a birdie fest,
A little bit easier golf course then.
which doesn't always work to your favor.
Mhm.
But you know, big greens, you got to be a putter if you're going to win at the rail.
2002, Patricia,
Mounier-Lebouch
thank you very much.
from France, delightful. Her story is she got pregnant later in the fall and was expecting a baby. And when actually she got pregnant in the spring, and she came to Media Day. And Patricia's claim to fame is she wears this really sassy Izod bucket hat that she turns the brim up. So when she came to Media Day, we all had bucket hats with the brims turned up. I mean, just little fun things, you know, which she got a big kick out of. And but when it was time for her to come back to defend, she couldn't come because she was having trouble with her pregnancy, and that was too bad, and she hated it. But she's delightful. She's still, Ondine is their little girl. They still just have the one, and her husband is also from France, and they're delightful people. As a matter of fact, I had lunch with them last year when they were at the tournament. So
Great. Okay, where are we? 2003, Candy King.
Kung, Candy Kung, K-U-N-G.
Oh, I spelled that wrong.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
Candy Kung was a washout winner. That was the only year that we lost money. I hated it. The economy was problemsome that year. We had trouble selling Pro-Ams. We had about a 3-year slump in selling out the Pro-Am. And the weather was bad throughout. And the day, Sunday, we were out of playing on Labor Day, and it was Sunday. And the weatherman was telling us, see, we have to have on-site weather. And it happened to be a weatherman from Peoria that started his own business, so it was really great. But you know, we have to pay for that, and you have to put in 5 telephone lines. It's all relevant to the big picture and the bottom line. And got up Sunday morning, and it was horrible, and it was raining, and I was quite the baby that day. I was so upset, and they kept wanting to call the tournament, and I wouldn't let them. Give him 1 more hour. Give him 1 more hour. I can remember.
You're like Eisenhower before D-Day.
Yeah, well, it didn't work, though. I finally gave up, went in the office and had a cry, and yeah, I could see myself. We were in the LPGA office, and the weatherman was there, and I'm saying, can't we wait? Can't we wait? And of course, we lost the telecast. We lost the final round. And Candy was declared the winner after the golf course became unplayable. And I can remember we were just all drowned, terribly drowned. We're doing the award ceremony in the Golden Rail tent, the LRS Golden Rail tent. And one of the fellows from the media who had been covering the golf tournament since the beginning from Alton, Illinois, came up to me and gave me a framed picture of me that he had, what do you call that when you put the frame around it? Not the frame, it was...
The border?
The border. I just went blank. Mat. The mat. And all the media had written me notes. And it was, I told him, I said, this could not have come at a better time. That was my reward for that day. And of course, when the final numbers came in, we lost about $86,000. And I...
Did State Farm cover that, or you started in the hole for the next year?
Started in the hole. Well, it didn't start in the hole because our contract with State Farm was 50% comes at the beginning of our year and 50% mid-year. Okay. But I had to make it up, and I did.
Well, the next year, 2004, is Christy Kerr.
Christy Kerr, big star, and State Farm was ecstatic by that time. Mr. Jack North was our main man at State Farm, and he was a big fan of Christy Kerr's from watching, and he was really, really excited. And her mother was there, and
so a good year in 2004.
Yes.
That brings us up to 2005, and we're not going to talk about 2005.
Okay.
We'll save that for when we're actually on the golf course itself. We've got quite a bit more to talk about, but it's going to be fun walking around with you and sharing your memories when we're actually on that terrain.
It will be fun. I'm looking forward to that. And you can meet Jim Johnson, who was there when they first turned the first blade of grass, and he's still there.
Okay. So we got something to look forward to.
We do.
Sandy, there's been some fascinating stories, and it always impresses me. I think I told you up front, to me, this is important history.
Yeah.
You know, the LPGA is an important institution. It's one of the early institutions that women were able to get involved with sports in a very public way.
Yes.
And it's fun to hear all the background stories. They're much more fascinating than one would think.
Well, it's been a tremulous and fun 27 years, I can tell you that the ups and downs, but the highs were always better than the lows.
Okay. And with that, we'll end the interview. Thank you very much, and hope that you stay around and check out the last session as well.
See you in the spring.
Bye.